If this video finds you in a dark moment when you just feel like you're never going to be able to stop binge eating, first thing I'd want to say is, I know how hard you've been trying to stop, and I suspect you believe that you haven't been trying hard enough. I think that's a common conclusion for most people who struggle with this. You just imagine it must be somehow that you're not putting enough effort in, and that's why you're not able to stop binge eating. But if this problem has worn you down and exhausted you, believe me, you have been expending a lot of energy and a lot of effort. It doesn't feel like it when you have those moments of despair and hopelessness, when you feel like giving up, you can't fight anymore, which I think is part of the problem as we turn it into a fight, because it's something that we don't want to be doing. We're doing it, straight away that's a conflict. We're going to get in a fight about that with ourselves. If you are experiencing hopelessness and despair about recovery, that is part of the recovery process. I don't know if anybody recovers from binge eating and will not describe many, many, many moments of despair and hopelessness. I probably felt like that, at the worst, every single day for a long time. But even during recovery, regularly, I came back to this place of, I can't recover. Recovery is for other people. Like, they have something that I don't have. They have more willpower, or they have more resources, or more intelligence, or whatever it might be. Or they're a type A personality and I'm not. Thought I was too messy and inconsistent to be the kind of person who recovered. One thing that actually started to shift around my experience of despair and hopelessness, I started to notice that there was a cycle to it. That I never felt hopelessness and despair 100% of the time. I'd have moments of hope. But in my hopeless moments, I'd look at hopeful Sarah and I would think, gosh, that was just an illusion. I was just deluding myself to imagine that I could actually do anything differently. So I started to name the experience of hopelessness and despair as just that, an experience. Because one of the reasons why hopelessness is potentially the hardest place to be for a human being is because hopelessness isn't just about what you're feeling now. It's a story that nothing can ever get better. Nothing is ever going to change for the better. And that is frightening, because you're looking at your future and imagining that this is it. And so to remember, one, it's an experience, it does fluctuate. And two, we do not know the future. Hopelessness tells us what the future's going to be, i.e. terrible. But we're using the past, or we might be using the present, and then we're projecting how we're feeling now into the future. We can't imagine feeling any different to how we feel now. So it's being able to take a small step back just to see that, to see what's going on. It doesn't mean you're automatically going to feel hopeful and terrific about everything, but recognizing there's often a cycle to this. We don't know the future. So therefore the story of hopelessness isn't going to be as true as it really feels for us when we're experiencing it. So to say I'm experiencing hopelessness is very different to everything's hopeless, everything's terrible, nothing is going to change. One area where I see people getting stuck in recovery, which bounds them back to this place of hopelessness, is unrealistic expectations of what recovery looks like. Here's the trap, and you can tell me if you've fallen into it. And the trap is that recovered you is basically you on your best day. So you take the best days of, these are the times when I'm eating the way that I want to eat, and I'm feeling good, and I'm being really productive. And because I know I can do these things on a day here and there, I should be arriving at a place where that's just who I am all the time. And it sets you up. It sets you up because you believe that's how things should be. And then when you're not feeling like that and you're not behaving like that, you feel like things are not how they should be. And that's painful when we believe that things are not how they should be. So building up this image of who you would be on the other side of binge eating is still going to involve inconsistency. It's still going to involve overeating at times. It's probably still going to involve not being entirely happy with your body. Of course, you will have heard that cliche about recovery not being linear. And if you've watched quite a few of my videos, you may have heard me talk about the states before. So rather than this idea of getting from A to B, I talk about state A and state B. Now, state A is you in your recovered state. So that's feeling fairly balanced with food. Your appetite is fairly regulated. There are going to be some swings. You're going to have some good days. You're going to have some bad days, but it isn't chaos. Whereas state B is in the binge and the chaos and feeling the shame, the out of control, the compulsion. And the recovery path for many of us actually looks like moving between states A and B. So you might have a couple of days in state A where you felt quite balanced and free around food. And then before you know it, it feels like you've pinged back into state B and you're back in the binge. For a really stable recovery, it actually means knowing how to move from state B into state A, to bring yourself out of chaos and into a sense of regulation and balance. Because what it often feels like is if you feel like you've had some days where you have felt balanced and oh gosh, you finally got it, you've got this recovery thing, but then something triggers you into state B and you're binging again, it feels like on a linear path, you've gone right back. It feels like you've gone backwards. And actually, this isn't a moving forward and backwards thing. It's about trying to bring yourself into state A more often. So you spend more and more time in state A and it starts to feel more like your default self. And now it's important to be mindful that state A isn't this image of you on your best day, because that isn't realistic. So right now, if you feel like you are in the thick of it, you are out of control again, rather than, oh, I took a couple of steps forward and then I took 5 steps back. It's like, oh, I'm in my state B at the moment. And then when you're in that state, if you are full of fear and full of panic, the way often you try to rebalance yourself is by trying to make these big decisions, these big overhauls. Right, I'm just going to overhaul my diet, or I'm just going to think of all the things that I'm supposed to do in recovery and make sure that from tomorrow I'm just going to do all of those things. And it's another way that you set yourself up. Decisions that come from a place of panic and fear rarely lead us to peace and regulation. What you think you need to get out of this fear and panic is, if I can just get a control of my food, then this fear and this panic will subside. And it might look more the other way around. How to ground yourself so that the fear and panic subsides, and then you might feel more regulated with food. It's very hard to find regulation from fear and panic. But if we're talking about how to ground yourself, I have a video which I'll link to below where I talk about the 3 points of connection. Because what we need to do is to move away from this hyper focus on food, that food is the path to feeling better, and connect to something else. So the 3 points of connection being connecting to self, could be mindfulness, it could be journaling, movement, walking, like anything that makes you connect to another part of yourself. It could be connecting to other people. It could be friends, family, other support networks, maybe even online spaces of other people who understand this. And the 3rd point of connection is connecting to the world. So some people might feel safest in nature. Now we each have one of these connection points that feels safer for us, and one of them that feels the most challenging. So some people might find it unbearable to try and connect to themselves or do anything mindful, so they need to connect to something outside of them. Whereas for someone else, people might not feel safe, and actually coming back to the self is where they feel more connected. The point of this is to be able to disconnect from the source that is causing all this fear and panic to flood in, and to connect to something safer. And in my other video, I go into this a little bit more. And so when you are able to ground, then it feels possible to make a decision about, okay, where do I need to shift my focus and intention to start moving back towards state A? And for many people, this can start with the bare basics of just getting those anchor meals in, that breakfast, lunch and dinner, making sure that you are eating not even enough, but sometimes often a bit more than you think that you need. If you have a brain that can trigger binge urges when food is more erratic, or you're trying to lose weight or restrict, then that part of the brain needs to be reassured. And it doesn't get reassured with language, it gets reassured by eating enough. So that could be one. That might not be your struggle. You may have found that planning food has helped before when you've been in state A. If you're anything like me, one of the things I had to look at was how I was talking to myself. Because for as long as I was being hard on myself, running myself down, believing that I was such a failure, when that belief system was active, I couldn't take any positive steps to looking after myself. So if you are in this place of hopelessness, one, naming it as an experience and remembering that you don't know the future. I also have a video on conquering despair in binge eating recovery, which is very relevant to this. I will link that one too. When you are thinking about formulating your state A, watch out for like perfectionism and all or nothing thinking sneaking in. I've also done a video about what binge eating recovery looked like for me. What does it look like in the recovered state? If it's not perfect, if you're not in control and you're not out of control, what does that actually look like? If you struggled with food for a long time, it's hard for your brain to even conceptualize it. So I have done a video about what that looked like for me. There's a lot of linking to other videos. I don't normally have to signpost to quite as many videos as this. And then the grounding and the disconnection and the reconnection. We need to disconnect from this energy that's coming in, because the more focused you are on the binge itself, on binge eating, sometimes the harder it is to break, because you're so focused on trying to not do this thing instead of disconnecting and plugging into something else. Because for as long as 100% of your attention is on this, every food decision you make, the stakes are so high, and that's going to keep feeding your fear, your anxiety, and potentially your despair. And ultimately, recovery is a series of returning to yourself, returning, as opposed to this lovely linear path and you go through all these steps in order. It feels like chaos. And if you would like some support with the chaos of this, I do run some groups. I have a community. I run a couple of different types of groups depending on what kind of connection you might want. But if you feel like that is something that would be helpful for you, you can check out my website and details below. I think this is just a really difficult path to tread when you struggle with food, when that's your problem in life, because there's nowhere you can go to get away from it. I've been on holiday in beautiful locations and still been in utter torment about this stuff. So of course my position now on the other side of it is a very hopeful one, and that's easy for me to say on this side of it. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I guess I just really want to acknowledge how dark and scary this stuff can get, and that people who have not been through it just aren't gonna be able to understand that. The amount of times I felt like dismissed or just completely not understood by therapists a lot as well. Because if you haven't been there, I mean, this stuff just doesn't seem to make sense, right? Hopefully this was helpful. Go well, and I will see you on the next video.